Welcome to this walk through Philippians 4, verses 10 to 14. We now come to the section at the end of the letter where Paul turns to thank the Philippians for their care for him and provision for him. And in the process, Paul is encouraging them in their own discipleship and continues himself to model the discipleship, which is the life in Christ. So let's read through the text. Eharende in curio megalos, hoti ede pote anathalete to hyper emu phronein, hokai ephronete e kairestede. Uch hoti kath husteresen lego, ego gar emathon in hoise mi autarkes enai. Oida kai tape nustai, oida kai perisiuen, in panti kai in passen memuetai, kai cortatsistai, kai penan, kai perisiuen, kai husterestai. Panta ischio into in dunamuntime. Plain kalos e poiesete sun koinonesan tesmu te thlipse. So now let's walk through the text. Our first word, echaren, is in the aorist passive. You don't see the theta there because of the rho, but it's an aorist passive, but this verb is used in all three voices with pretty much the same sense. So Paul is saying, I rejoiced, and I rejoiced greatly in the Lord. Back in verse 4, he called upon the Philippians to rejoice in the Lord. And again, I say rejoice, and now we see Paul himself rejoicing greatly in the Lord. And then he says why? Because, ede pote, now at length, now at last, anathalete. Anathalete here from anathalo means to sprout or grow once again. Thalo means to sprout or grow, and then you got ana on the front. Taking a look at the article in BDAG on anathalo, you see it can either be used intransitively or with a direct object. And down here in number 2, BDAG suggests that either one of these are probable. And so you can either you have revived as far as your care for me is concerned, or you have revived your care for me. In other words, we can take this infinitive here, ta hyper emu phronein, as either the direct object or an accusative of reference. And it pretty much means the same either way. So at length, or now at last, you've revived your care for me, or refreshed that. Ho kai ephronete. Upon whom, or for whom, or about whom, in other words, Paul, about whom indeed, kai, in a sense, about whom indeed you were thinking, you were keeping in mind. But echareste, you lacked opportunity or occasion. So a couple of imperfects here, probably for a continuous activity. You were thinking, but you were lacking the opportunity. We don't know why they lacked the opportunity or the occasion. Most English translations render ephronete something like care or concern, about whom indeed you were concerned or had care. But that misses the connection with this verb earlier in the letter. It's used back in 1:7 and twice in 2:2 and 2:5, 3:15, twice again, 3:19 and 4:2. So 10 times in Philippians out of the 26 times in the New Testament. This thought or care or concern is actually an expression of the mind of Christ, and this language was strong there in chapter 2. In our last passage we saw the word logizomai, another word for setting the mind, or what we're doing with our minds. It's a big theme in Paul, and especially in this letter. So they were thinking about him, but they lacked the opportunity. Now, verse 11. It's not that I'm speaking kath husteresen, in keeping with lacking. So he's not just speaking out of this need, this lack. because he says, for I learned, or probably I have learned, in hois, in what things, what circumstances, what conditions I am, autarkes eini, to be autarkes. Gordon Fee says this is like a meteor fallen from the Stoic sky, this word autarkes, meaning self-sufficient. It's a big theme in the Stoics. So Paul is saying emathon eini. Emathon, when it's used with the infinitive, in other words, monthano, used with the infinitive, means often learn how. So learn how to be self-sufficient. A number of scholars, when they discuss this passage, draw the distinction between Paul and the Stoics, saying, for example, like Hellerman on page 258 and 59, the Stoic would not express joy nor point to God as the source of his or her ability to be content. In other words, to be self-sufficient in this sense. I'm not sure that difference is as great as they make it, at least for some of the Stoics. I'm thinking of Epictetus, or Epictetus, depending on how you want to say that name. So Epictetus, for whom God's sovereign, benevolent, providential care is a major source of his equanimity in all circumstances. So there's maybe more overlap than has sometimes been seen here. But in any case, Paul is saying here that he has learned to be this self-sufficient, but it's not self-sufficient in himself apart from God, as we've seen throughout this letter, all of Paul's writings, and now in what follows. Because he goes on to say, oida, I know, kai tapinusthai, oida kai perisiuen. So we have a pair here. I know how to be humbled or brought low. I know how to abound or have abundance. And the kai here could be both and, or it could be the first is assensive and the second adjunctive. So that'd be something like, I know indeed how to be humbled, and I also know how to abound or have abundance. The pattern that we have here is not drawing upon Stoicism, it's drawing upon Christ. We have this same pattern back in chapter 2 in the Christ hymn, that he was humbled et tapenosin, and then he was exalted, hyperupsosin. So the same general pattern here is expressed. Now in terms of Paul's own life, and particular context here has to do with his financial needs, since that's what they provided him with, that he's thanking them for. But it's probably to be understood more widely than that in general. So I know indeed how to be humbled, and I know how to abound. In everything and in all things, I have learned the secret, memuetai. Interesting word that's used in the mystery religions for being initiated into the mystery. So a lot of English translations have, I've learned the secret. And what's the secret? Well, again, we have a series of kais here. Kai kortadzesthai, kai peinan. So there seems to be a pair here. So both to be full or to be filled, to be satisfied, and to hunger. Both to have abundance and to lack. Then he spells out explicitly the source of this ability that he has. Panta iskuo. I'm able, or I have the power, I'm competent for all things. This whole, no matter what's coming, either the abundance or the lack, I'm competent in all these things in the one who is strengthening me. Some people take the N here as a by, the instrumental. It is instrumental, but the instrumental is based on the locative, I think. So it's precisely being in Christ that he is enabled then to do all this by Christ. It's a funny kind of self-sufficiency. As he says in Galatians, no longer I that live, but Christ that lives in me. So this self-sufficiency is the self-sufficiency of one who is taken up into Christ and made one with him. and drawing upon his resources, no matter what comes. So we see that Paul's times of lack and deprivation are themselves part of this life of discipleship and part of his learning the ways of Christ, part of his sharing in the life of Christ. So what we would take as negatives as well as positives, he sees the whole thing as positive in the sense of being part of his life in Christ. So again, we see Paul modeling the very life of Christ, the discipleship that he's been teaching them about. And then he concludes, plain kalos epoieseta, but nevertheless, you did well. Now, what he's referring to is they're sending financial support to him. You did well, but notice how he describes that. Sun koinonesantes mu te thlipse. Partnering together, sharing together in my affliction, in my trial, in my tribulation. Sun koinoneo means to be connected with, to participate or share. And BDAG in section 1b says that here it means in the sense of taking a sympathetic interest. So, but you did well to have a sympathetic interest in my tribulation. But this may be too weak. BDAG's first gloss is, quote, to be associated with someone in some activity, to be connected, tini, with something. So to be connected with the tribulation of me. In other words, this dative is what this is connecting to. So he's saying, you did well to be connected with my tribulation. They're sharing in this thlipsis. They're partners in the suffering which Paul experiences. And Paul views his sufferings for the gospel as a part of Christ's own sufferings in bringing in God's salvation. It's part of the birth pangs of the Messiah. And he's here encouraging the Philippians by interpreting their own sufferings and their sharing in Paul's sufferings as taking part in what God himself is doing. So he's thanking them. He's also interpreting for them the significance of their action. It's part of something much larger. In the final sections of the letter, Paul go on and develop these themes a bit further.